Welcome class to Chapter 4, Designing Web Pages with CSS. This video lecture is going to cover the following objectives: explain the importance of separating design from content, describe CSS, define inline, embedded, and external styles in their order of precedence, describe what a CSS rule is and what its syntax, explain the difference between a selector, a property, and a value, and then lastly we'll look at creating styles that use text and color properties. So when we look at CSS versus HTML, I want you to understand that HTML is defining the structure of the document, as in this is the title, this is a header, this is a heading 1, this is a paragraph, this is the main section, this is the footer section. So defining the function of the content on the page, whereas CSS is going to format our content on our page. So we want to make sure that we can keep the structure separate from the presentation of our web page. And further, we even like to separate the content from our web page so that we don't have to be in control of that. That's kind of outside of the scope of this course. So in this chapter, we are going to work with our fitness website. We'll create a CSS file. We'll link our HTML pages to that CSS file for formatting. We'll look at how do we create style rules. We'll continue to add comments, and we'll also add comments to our CSS file. And then we'll learn how to validate our CSS file as well. So cascading style sheets, or CSS, is a document that just provides our styles. Okay, and we can have those styles inline in our document, our HTML file. We can have them embedded into our HTML file, and we can have them as a separate style sheet. And the separate style sheet is always the goal that we want to go to. And you want to think of these CSS styles as a way to take our branding for that company, and put that branding onto our website. So as mentioned before, there's inline, there's embedded, and there's external. So here's an example of inline, used to add a style to the start tag for an element. So in this example, we have the h1 tag. We add the style attribute, okay, just like we had with image, and we had this src attribute. So a style equal, and then we provide any rules, okay, or a CSS rule here in the quotation marks, and we'll look at the syntax of those a little bit later here, and then our closing head tag. So this particular style of font color, navy, is only going to be applied to that one h1 tag on that HTML page. When we get into embedded, it affects the entire HTML document, just that one web page. So here we have a style tag. So we have an opening style tag to a closing style tag, and then we'll put the style rule in between. So again, one page, inline is one element, embedded, otherwise known as a page style, is for just that page. And then we'll lastly talk about external. So this is creating a separate document with a .css file extension, and then we go ahead and link that document into our HTML pages, any page that we want those styles to be applied to. So external styles provide the flexibility to quickly change web page formats, because the styles used in it are applied to every page that is linked to that particular style sheet. So you could essentially change the entire look of an entire website, and that is called reskinning the website. And then we look at style sheet precedence. So if we have a header 1 rule, so an h1 rule, and we have it defined inline, we have it defined embedded, and we also have it defined external. And this is how the cascade will work. Okay, so here I have an example of an inline style, which is the first line you see here, okay, embedded inside of the tag itself, so inline the tag. And then here is the embedded style redefined, and then in my CSS file I further have another one, and they're all for h1. So which one wins? Okay, so this is how the cascade works. So the browser looks for the .css file, the external. Okay, it applies that it is green. Then what happens is it looks inside the page. Is there any page styles? Then that one is then overridden. So it's not green anymore, it is now blue. And then if there's an inline style, that one wins. Okay, so in this case, responsive web design, if defined in all three ways, would end up being the color of red. So let's get into a CSS rule. So a CSS rule consists of a selector, and you can kind of think of the selector is at this point like an HTML tag. We will look at classes and we'll look at IDs, but right now we're working with, in this example, the body tag. And we're saying we want the background color to be green. So we have the selector, we had a set of curly braces, and then we also have the closing curly brace, and then we have the CSS property. So background dash color is the property, and then this is the value that is going to be assigned to it. It is separated by a colon. Now remember, when you were working with attributes in HTML, they're separated by an equal sign. So these are separated by a colon. You can put a space in there. You could have it all on one line. If you have more than one property and value, it's much better to code it this way, where you would go ahead and tab in, and so you would have multiple, so you create some indentation. Notepad doesn't do a very good job of that, but our editor will. So that is another format that you could use as well. So this slide kind of just breaks down what I just stated. And so we have something like body, header, nav, main, or footer. Could also be an ID or a class. We worked with IDs already, where we assigned an ID to some divs. And then we also have classes, which we'll be talking about a little further as we continue. So the styles are separated, or sorry, the properties and values. So the actual style that you're setting, like background dash color green, if I have another one, I'm going to separate that list of styles with a semicolon. So here is a list of examples. Okay, so color is going to be our text color, background dash color. And these will be all lowercase when you look at them. And then you got text indent, border width, font style. These just a small list of some properties that we can work with. So figure 4-7 kind of dissects it a little bit more. So looking at CSS text properties, you can use CSS styles to format web page text in a variety of ways. We can have fallback values. We can measure our font sizes in different units, including pixels, points, and EMs, or by a keyword or percentage. So here's an example of those units. We have EM. Okay, this is recommended by the W3C as well as percentage. And it's because it's relative to the default size of the element. So for example, I can say 1.25 EM, and what that simply means is that that particular element is going to be increased by 25% of the default font size. So if my font size is 18, it's going to increase it by 25%. The same thing goes for the percentage. Okay, and then we have pixel. You want to be very particular if you ever use pixel. Have a good reason why, because it depends on the screen resolution. Point is going to be used for printing our web pages, and then keyword, we can do XS small. Sizes are relative to the browser's default font size, but size options are limited. So again, please try to use EM or percentage units when you're working with your CSS text properties. So coming out to w3schools.com and just clicking on CSS, we can click on CSS text and we can get a lot of different properties, and we can play with these here with the try it yourselves. And so you can use this as a resource. You can see text color, there's text alignment, text decoration, transformation, spacing, and shadow as you go through those tutorials. So let's look at CSS colors. So there's three types of color codes that can be used within CSS, and your Extend Your Knowledge assignment is going to work with these. So we have hex numbers, which can consist of a 6-digit number code that corresponds to the RGB value. We also have red, green, blue, the RGB color value we can specify, and the HSL, the hue, saturation, and lightness color values. So to use a color, such as a background color here, this is an example of hex. So hex is always going to be prefixed with the hashtag or the # if you want to look at it that way. And there's many websites that if you have an RGB triplet, you can just go ahead and type that in and it'll convert it to the hex value for you. So hex numbers go from 0 to 9 and then A through F. If they repeat, such as F, 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 that would be the color of white. Okay, so white is going to be with an RGB, they're used for monitors. And so the more color you add to a monitor, the closer you get to white, and the less colors you use, the closer you get to black. So in the example of FFFFFF, the 6-digit hex number, I could code that just as FFF because it's doing the red, the green, and the blue. And if they are the same number, you only have to type just the 3 hex values. Now on the other side, black is going to be 0, 0, 0 because it would be 6 zeros that would bring in the color of black. So here on this slide in table 4-3, we can actually see those black and white examples. And again, you can shortcut those. So with red, I could type F00. With green, I could say 080. Blue, 00F. So whenever the 2 digits repeat in all 3 of them, you can go ahead and shortcut it down. Like this one, I would not be able to do that for orange, and I would not be able to do that here because these are 2 separate numbers, only if they are similar. Now here's the corresponding RGB value. Okay, in parentheses, RGB goes from 0 to 255. You can't go anything past 255. So 0 being the lowest number, 255 being the highest number. And again, the closer we get to 255, the greatest amount of color that we put on a monitor, the lighter the color gets. Okay, and then you have hue, saturation, and light, which you can work with here. And again, your Extend Your Knowledge is going to take you through practicing with 3 different colors, converting from hex to RGB and HSL, and you'll be using websites to help you along the way with that. So if you have any questions on this first section of chapter 4, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to explain it perhaps in another way. So at this point, you will be able to complete your Extend Your Knowledge assignment.